Hello and welcome to another SHM movie breakdown and review, this time for a semi-classic movie. It's a 1982 film called, as you'll have seen from the title of course, The Thing. Now, The Thing was directed by John Carpenter, the screenplay was by Bill Lancaster, and the story itself is based on a book called Who Goes There by John W. Campbell. And the film has a relatively simple plot. The book itself has a relatively simple plot as well. The plot revolves around a number of characters, but predominantly Kurt Russell's character, who is a helicopter pilot at a remote Arctic base. And at this base, a parasitic alien life form is come across in the camp by whatever means, we won't get into that. And basically this alien life form has the ability to mimic various living things. And by the nature of this alien, the crew of this small outpost begin to doubt each other. They wonder who they can trust and who, of course, is not human anymore. It's a film which has a very large following. It's one of the most respected and widely loved classic horror films, and certainly alien films of all time. It's one of my personal favourite movies, quite probably my favourite horror movie of all time, and has one of the most unique movie villains. Now, as always, we're going to break down the film into our 5 major categories. First of all, we have the story and plot. For the story and plot, this film is very basic. It's a simple premise set in a remote location which, like other films like Alien and Predator, are not easy to escape from. Because by the nature of a horror film, if you have a wide open space with a ground level villain, that immediately takes the pressure away, because you can just say, well, why didn't the protagonists of the film flee the area? In occasions like Predator in the jungle, Alien on the ship, and The Thing at this outpost, it eliminates that issue because they can't get away. They have to deal with this issue where they are. Certainly in the case of The Thing, because the temperatures outside the camp are extremely low and would kill you very quickly. Now, for the story and plot, I'm going to give The Thing a 7 out of 10. Because although it's a relatively simple plot about a group of people working at a confined location and encountering a monster of some kind that they have to survive, it can sound overly simplistic. But what they do with that plot, which is a very similar plot to the original book, is very good. They make the most out of what they have. It's a fantastically and beautifully claustrophobic film which highlights, as any good horror movie does, that the alien or monster in the scenario isn't necessarily any worse than the way humans act toward each other. So for the story and plot, a 7 out of 10 is what I'm going to award The Thing. As far as the characters and motivations, well, they're excellent. Kurt Russell is one of my personal favourite actors, and all of the other actors in the film, even those who only have a small role, fulfill their roles beautifully. They have excellent chemistry, they feel like real people, which is exactly how it's supposed to be, and there's virtually no annoying conversations in the film. Often in a horror movie especially, you'll have interactions between characters that you'll think, what was the point of that? That was dumb. They wouldn't have said that. They wouldn't have done that. In this film, that doesn't happen. Everything is there for a reason, and sometimes the reason is just for it to be realistic. And that's lovely to see in a horror film, and it's so rare that it really does make you appreciate just how much better a class of horror film The Thing actually is. Something which is very easy to overlook in the horror genre. So, for the characters and their motivations overall, I'm going to give it an 8, because the way they act and the way they interact is very good and very enjoyable. As far as the visuals and effects, well, this film is incredible. It's possibly the best use of animatronics and practical effects I have ever seen in any film. The monster effects are legendary. You pretty much cannot check out any video anywhere about the top 10 or top 5 or top whatever movie effects without the Thing being in there somewhere. It's that good. Even for a 1982 film, the effects still hold up to this day. They are beautifully grotesque, fantastical in every way. They capture your imagination. You cannot look away from the screen when they're on. As cliched as those things sound, this film is worthy of having those statements made about it. So for the visuals overall and the effects, I'm going to give the film a 9. Because although by today's standards it may not necessarily be as scary as back then, it is still a remarkably good looking film and the effects are phenomenal. And they required so much effort that the man in charge of them ended up in hospital due to exhaustion. Moving on now to the audio and the soundtrack of the film, it's outstandingly good. And again, like the story, the reason why it's so good is because it does a lot with a little. The soundtrack in tense scenes only consists of a couple of notes, but they work brilliantly. It has one of the most iconic monster soundtracks of any of those classic horror films. And it was done by Ennio Morricone, who is a legendary composer. So, for the overall audio, not just the music, but the general sounds of the film as well, which are used to great effect with eerie, creepy, claustrophobic noises, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10, because it's not necessarily the best thing ever, but it's very good, especially for its time and budget. As far as the rewatchability and entertainment, as with all films that I review, this is, of the 5 categories, the most down to personal opinion. This is purely me talking, whereas the other things are quantifiable based on sound and visuals. This is much more of a personal category. And for the rewatchability and entertainment, I'm going to have to give this film a 10, because I love watching it. It is, as I said, quite possibly my favourite horror film ever, definitely one of my favourite films ever, and no matter how many times you watch it, you see more things, little nuances between the characters, details on the creature transformations, and just overall environmental changes that you hadn't noticed the last time you watched it. So as I said, it's going to be definitely a strong 10 for me personally, as far as rewatchability and entertainment. And overall, that gives The Thing 1982 version an overall score of a very respectable 4.1 out of 5. Now, if you're new to the channel, that may not sound amazing considering how much praise I've given it in every way. But as I have mentioned on an earlier video, very few, if any, films will actually get to that magic 5 out of 5. So for a 4.1 to come up on a film that's from 1982 and in the horror genre especially is remarkably good. The Thing is most definitely one of my favourite films. And the overall verdict is, if you haven't seen the 1982 version of The Thing, which a lot of people still haven't, especially younger people, which is understandable, if you love horror movies, if you love rich visual horror creatures, as I do, definitely check out this film, because this is quite possibly the best example of a horror movie monster done perfectly. But that's it overall for my review of the 1982 John Carpenter version of The Thing. And overall, thanks for watching, but for now, I'll see you next time.